What's the transition like going from high school to college and then from college to the NFL? Well, I've had a lot of transitions over the course of my career. I'm about to tell you what it's like. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Elite Athletes TV. I'm Mike Pulaski, 11-year pro quarterback and world champion. If you're new to the channel, we talk about football, we talk about quarterback training, we talk about improving your athletic skills. Please subscribe, ring that bell. That way you'll get notified every time we have a new video coming out. Give me a thumbs up if you're ready to learn about what it's like to go from high school to college, or if you love learning about football. And leave me a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. Tell me what you'd like to learn about. And if I did it in football, if I know about it, I'd be happy to make a video for you. Today, we're talking about transitions. And there is a huge transition as an athlete when you go from high school to college and from college to the NFL. People ask me all the time, what was the biggest transition for me? And for me, the biggest transition was going from high school to college. I stepped off the field at a D2 high school team. We had some good athletes. We had 4 college scholarships on my team. But we ran the wing tee. It wasn't very sophisticated. Our defense wasn't very sophisticated. We ran cover 3 cloud most of the time. And if you haven't seen my video on cover 3, I'll put the card right up here. And we didn't do a whole lot. And so my football IQ wasn't very high in high school. I was an athlete. I played both offense and defense. I was all state as a safety. I was all county as a quarterback. And so my athletic tools really carried me more than my football knowledge. So when I went from that environment with a great head coach who I love dearly, but when I went from that environment to the college football environment in the Pac-12, my offensive coordinator was Terry Shea, and Terry is one of the all-time greats, not just in terms of football knowledge, but in terms of as a human being too, just a fantastic man. It was like literally diving. They talk about a big fish in a small pond. In high school, I was that big fish in a small pond. I went from that small pond in high school and dove into the Pacific Ocean. It was massive. And there was so much learning. And the athletes that you have around you going from small school, high school to full on, it was Pac-10 back then, but full Pac-10 or Pac-12, you have amazing athletes. I saw guys running like I had never seen speed before. We saw running backs who were just phenomenally talented, DBs who could get in and out of breaks in a hurry. And so there were some cats that could play the game, and I had never seen that kind of talent. That was a huge step for me. On top of that, trying to learn the verbiage of a college offense. And as I look back now, it wasn't a horribly tough scenario in terms of learning. We ran a digit system, which meant that the routes were numbered across the board, and we had certain names for protections and certain names for plays. But numbered routes, digit system, is pretty simple to understand now looking back as a former 11-year pro. But for me, it was a lot of new learning. And so that jump was massive. And it took me a couple years till I could catch on, till I could really understand the game. Through the help of Terry Shea, through the help of the quarterback ahead of me, Troy Taylor, who's now the head coach at Sacramento State, who is just a brilliant football mind, by the way. If you ever get recruited by Troy Taylor, you should go there because he's phenomenal. Phenomenal coach, phenomenal human being, great staff. But he helped me out a ton. And then finally, the finishing piece was getting Steve Mariucci as my offensive coordinator too, kind of tied it all together. Learning the system, learning football, and then getting the attitude and the mentality to go with it. All 3 of those came together under Coach Mooch. So it was a huge step. Took 2 to 3 years for me to really get up to speed going to college. Now, when I stepped from the Pac-12, Pac-10 back then, into the NFL, it didn't feel like as big a jump. Yes, those guys were talented, and systems were more complex, and there was a lot going on that I still had to learn again, but I had a better understanding of the game of football stepping from a college team in the Pac-10 to the NFL. And so I tell people all the time, going from high school to college, it felt like guys were 2 steps faster. what I used to have time to make a read and an extra hitch and make a throw in high school, all of a sudden happened like that. Going from the Pac-10 to the NFL, guys were about one step faster. And so they were the greatest athletes in the world, but I played with some really great athletes in the Pac-10. There were several guys that I played against that were first-round picks. There were a couple guys that I played with that were first-round picks. And so they were talented at that level in college. The NFL was crazy talented, and it was more consistent talent across the board. But I had seen that kind of speed on the field before. The offenses were much more complex. Sam's offense was a no-huddle offense. He ran a West Coast style of offense, all the West Coast concepts, but he had a code word for everything. I released a code word video a couple days ago. I'll put the card right up here so you can check it out. And so that got really complicated. The verbiage behind it and getting the formations and motions and everything behind it, that got really complicated. But speed-wise, talent-wise, it was a much bigger step going from high school to college than it was from college to the NFL. Now, I went from the NFL to the CFL the next year, and that was a different game. Now you have 12 dudes on the field. Everybody who is not on the line of scrimmage, so offensive lineman and one receiver, can run at the line of scrimmage. Motion doesn't just have to be horizontal now. It can be vertical. And so that was a huge change where you didn't get a set on offense, where you're trying to learn, new styles with 12 guys on the field, new rules. The field was different, 60 yards wide. They had 20-yard end zones. So it literally felt like you were playing on a cow pasture. And it was a different mentality about the game. On top of that, back then we had VHS, whenever you got VHS tape, when it came from a Canadian team, offense and defense were spelled with a C instead of an S. So that was pretty funny to me. But it was unique. I played for American teams, so the culture wasn't all that different, but the system, the style was different. CFL wasn't quite as talented as the NFL teams. Speed didn't bother me at all. But getting that new system. Then, talk about a transition, I went from the CFL to the Arena Football League. Now, that was a big change. Arena football field was, I think, 26 yards wide and 50 yards long, 8-yard end zone. So you could put most of an arena football field into a CFL end zone. And it became a much quicker game. I won't say it was faster because the NFL is as fast as it gets, but it was much quicker because the spaces were so condensed. You have 8 guys on an arena field. You have 11 on an NFL field, but you have, I think, 1/4 of the space of an NFL field. And so they say it's 77% denser with people than an NFL field is. So accuracy had to be huge. Understanding angles that receivers took and coming out of plays was huge. There was also high motion in the Arena Football League for one receiver. And so timing on routes like that was also huge. That was a huge transition. Didn't have a very good coach my first year. Didn't understand the game very well my first year in that league. I got to a good quarterback coach, and I talked about that when I talked about life in the AFL. Cards up there. Tom Porras actually taught me a lot about the game. And then the next year, I ended up with Mike Hohensee as a coach, and Ho was a really, really good quarterback coach. And I got to understand the game quickly. And so, but once I understood that game quickly and mastered the footwork, then that game was probably my favorite to play. Had great teammates around me, but you get to throw the ball every single down. Every pass could be a touchdown. I mean, it's just awesome for a quarterback. And so that was a big transition as well. Then I went back from the arena game to the XFL. XFL, similar, it was like a hybrid between the NFL and the Canadian League in that you could put one single receiver in high motion, but you only had 11 guys on the field. So kind of traditional NFL rules, American football rules, with that high motion as well, and then some quirky rules around it they were trying to use to pub the sport. But that transition back was actually super easy because I was so used to the pace of the Arena Football League and how quick it was and how fast things happen that on that big field, it literally felt like you had forever to make decisions, to make reads, to make throws, and you had so much space because you had 5 linemen instead of having 3 linemen in a tight little box. So been through a lot of transitions. The biggest one for me, high school to college, and then watching the athletes in the NFL was pretty cool. Cool to be there. But a lot of fun along the way. My favorite time was in the Arena League because I loved the guys I played with. I loved winning a world championship, obviously, and I loved being able to throw the ball on every single down, and had a lot of success in that league too, which always helps make it your favorite. Appreciate you watching. That's just kind of a day in my life as a quarterback. I played for 7 teams, 11 seasons, 4 different leagues, a lot of transition in there. But when you're moving from high school to college, or from team to team, or from freshman to JV, look for the things that you do best, focus on those, and then look to improve on the things that you don't do. Learn the game, be open to new experiences, be open to new plays, and listen to your coaches. Coaches always have your best interest at heart. They're trying to get you to learn the game because it helps them look better too. So be open to new experiences, be open to try new things until you develop a system that works for you. Appreciate you watching today. Hopefully you can improve your quarterback skills, your football skills to become the player that you want to be, and you can get the same opportunity to transition like I did.